Okay, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me. Maybe you can write in the chat if you can hear me, or if you have your camera on, nod. Okay, thumbs up. I suppose you can. David, can you hear me? Okay. Your mic is muted yet, but I suppose you can, yeah? Yeah, loud and clear. Perfect. Okay. So hello and welcome to this live BIM Q&A session. My name is Janis Berkis, and I'm representing my company ITED, which I'm the CEO of. And this is already the sixth BIM Q&A session, but today is special because it's the first one which is international. So that's why it's in English today. And today's main topic will be BIM, digital twins, and maintenance. And my guest today is a very respected man in the industry, David Shepherd. And just before we jump into the Q&A, I will explain to you brief technical information and a small introduction, and then we can start. So ask your questions in the chat. We have a few questions also received before the event, which I will ask first for David. And you can ask any questions related to BIM. So they can be very basic or they can be very sophisticated. I truly believe David will be able to answer any of those. And we can start writing the questions right now, as I said, in the chat. And feel free to participate as much as you want. So once again, my name is Janis Berkis. I'm a BIM specialist, a manager, and also an owner. I've been involved in BIM projects for more than 15 years, and for more than 10 years, I've run my company that provides BIM-related services. In parallel, I have used BIM for my own projects, both for maintenance purposes, but also for construction and design. So I can also share a bit my experience as well today. But most of my time is related to my company called ITED, which I lead, and it specializes in three main fields. Either it's implementation of BIM into projects like tender phase or consulting of the clients or even training. Then it's the organization of the BIM projects, so the management of the BIM processes, both for buildings and also for infrastructure, both for during design and construction phase, and also the development of various models that usually support the previous mentioned use cases. So 100 plus projects in various countries, together with contractors, designers, and also asset managers. So once again, my guest today, David Shepherd. Let me unmute you, David. And I'll just stop sharing my screen here. Okay, David.
Hi there. Great to be here, Janis. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I think it's really good sometimes to be able to have these kind of open conversations, and I'm really grateful for the chance to be able to engage with those who are on this call and to be able to respond to questions. I say respond rather than answer because sometimes my response might not be the complete answer, but I think I can help people to look in the right direction. Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay. Thank you, David, for participating. I think it's going to be a wonderful conversation. Maybe you can just give a brief introduction. What is your occupation now? What are you doing? Why you are related in any way to digital twins and maintenance and etc.
Yeah. So, okay, let me begin by saying that, my kind of journey has been over several years, starting very much working actually in construction sites and working in a drawing office. And it's a very strange thing when you're actually using ink pens and tracing paper. But I go back that far. But I saw the opportunity as people began to digitize drawings, and I kind of never looked back from there. Where I am today is working as a digital product manager for the restoration renewal of the Houses of Parliament. And one of the key requirements we had was to capture as much as possible about the existing conditions of that building, which people call it the House of Parliament. It's where Big Ben is. Most people know it's quite an iconic site, but capture all of the conditions. We know that there's asbestos in different rooms. We know that there is, very kind of, there are materials which can be harmful if they're not looked after properly and so on. And there's also enormous heritage. And what we've tried to do is to capture all of that data in a 3D environment. And so we're very much using BIM. The vision ultimately is to be able to use that data for the operational stage of the project, which obviously then talks about digital twins and so on. So that's really kind of where I am with that, yeah? And that's why I'm where I am with the area. Just one other thing just to mention is that in my previous role, I worked in the context of asset management. So I was working with a team that was doing parliamentary maintenance, and the larger part of the budget was not around delivering projects, but around keeping the asset going. And some people are aware of the numbers for that in terms of something like 1.25 million a day being spent on reactive maintenance. So that's that's a very sobering amount of money, and it suddenly changes your view of what's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, true. I mean, we have various, I would say, experienced people here listening today, and also later they will be listening to this conversation as well. I mean, I've heard many people's opinions on what is a digital twin. I mean, starting from just a 3D model or something that's captured with a photo camera maybe, and also something that's really sophisticated. So can you tell me your opinion? What is a digital twin?
I think probably I hear that, and sometimes it's kind of frustrating because I can't imagine a single vendor that hasn't kind of thrown up a 3D picture and simply called it a digital twin. And I think the best way to understand it is the connection between the virtual and the physical asset. Now, that connection between virtual and physical doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be visualized in 3D. It simply has to be that the data from the physical, normally this is sensor data, real-time data, that is being used to inform a structure of information which we call a model. I'm saying that because I'm trying to expand people's horizons beyond thinking, oh, well, a digital twin has to have a 3D visual. Because the greatest power of a digital twin is when you're able to interrogate the virtual representation to get answers on what's happening in the physical realm. And I think that it's not something I'm necessarily going to go into at this point. I'm just saying we probably will touch on it, but I think it's really important to understand that it's having that ability to interrogate the data from the real-time sensors that is actually the twinning part of what we call a digital twin.
Yeah.
If we manage to have a 3D representation attached to that, then that is even better. But I'm very cautious about people assuming that if you're saying digital twin, you mean a 3D model. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. But I suppose, I mean, the building information models, they help in having a structured data, because usually, I mean, previously, at least before BIM, usually there was a chaos in the data, and since the models contain the kind of the physical assets, it's a bit more structured than having without.
Yeah. So the way I probably see it is, and we've seen this in GIS already. What we have is a visual, but beneath that visual is a data structure, which allows people to structure the information in a way that they can interrogate it. So that essentially what this is doing is it's making it easier for people who design and people who maintain the building to use structured data. And the more that we work in that type of environment and we work with structured data, the more that we can actually get out of it. The big challenge is that it's very difficult to interrogate unstructured data. So any system, and BIM is obviously key to that, that allows you to develop structured data in the process of designing something is going to be a strong starting point for taking things forwards. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned Houses of Parliament. So
Sure.
is there a digital twin for Houses of Parliament, and what is it used for?
Yeah, I've kind of mentioned that there's the use of 3D, and which is obviously not a digital twin. One of the key challenges that government has to address is where the priority needs to be. And the reason why I'm saying that is that you have to then think about importance and difficulty. If you have an asset like the House of Parliament, where you are in the process of renewing it, but you have legacy equipment and you have legacy systems that are not compatible with the new technology we're seeing today, then it becomes big effort to be able to get that to link. And so whilst it's progression, I see it as something that has to be integrated into the renewal. It's not something you can just kind of tack on to what we have right now and expect it to work. A lot of these controls that we use today, there are lots of vendors out there. There's Johnson Controls, there's Trend, there's Honeywell, and so on. They never built those systems with a view to connecting into a digital twin. And so that becomes real effort to do. The better approach, and this is the approach that I've taken, is to begin to install those sensors and use new types of protocols. One of them is called LoRaWAN, which is long range wide area network, but to install those. So then, I want to answer the question. The question is, well, what is government doing? Government is sponsoring a program which is called the National Digital Twin Program. And it has identified very specific areas where digital twins can add great value. We're looking at energy sectors. We're looking at highways, and especially highway maintenance, where what you're trying to do is to monitor the deterioration of things like bridges and roads and that sort of thing, and then be able to have condition-based maintenance. And I think this is what we've always got to think about in terms of the connection between what we're doing and what actually adds value, is being able to focus on something that improves what we're doing today. Planned preventive maintenance, having these schedules, it's probably not the optimum. The optimum would be to monitor condition and then to deliver maintenance in accordance with condition. And that's what the sensors allow you to do. So I'm just saying that there is a value proposition, but it's about looking into the future rather than trying to improve what we're doing today. Yeah. Okay. Again, I hope I've answered your question. Feel free to push back if you feel that there's some more stuff that you need to look at.
I suppose we let's start to have a look what
sure.
others might be interested in. I know, Ismail, you were writing also before this event, so I'll start with yours. So Ismail was asking about the connection between COBie and digital twin. If yes, how would you describe it?
Yeah, so right, let me see. COBie is very much based on IFC, and IFC structures information in terms of a hierarchy, a set of classes. The difference with digital twins is that digital twins goes one step further and says, let's not have a fixed hierarchy and then add properties to it, so walls, doors, windows, devices, sensors, and so on, and then start adding properties to it. the digital twin says, let's look at the building and the relationships between things. And when you start to look at building a relationship between things, that's what we call an ontology. So the way I'd respond to the question is to say, there is a connection because you have a structure you can start with. That's a big starting point, is to say, and very often when I was looking at structuring the information, having that structure in the first place is really, really important, because you can extract information from that. And there are ways that you can convert IFC to the language that's used by digital twins, which is digital twins development language. What I would encourage you to do is to start thinking about the way that people need to interrogate a digital twin is different to the way that people interrogate an IFC model. Because what they're doing when they're interrogating a digital twin is asking a question that spans across not just the building, but also the people that use it. Yeah. So I gave you an example of, let's say you're a hotel owner, you've decided that you want to do maintenance on the air handling units because your sensors have been picking up vibrations, but you also want to make sure that that maintenance is on hotels which have low occupancy. So suddenly you've got two sets of information. You've got the information that's coming from your sensors on one side, and on the other side, you have your room bookings that tell you what the occupancy is. The beauty of a digital twin is you can actually ask it, identify the hotels which have the vibration showing that the air handling units are going to be failing soon, but also have low occupancy. It's looking at two sets of information. It's looking at the vibration from the air handling units and the occupancy level of the hotels. That's what you can do with a digital twin, which you can't quite do with just trying to interrogate an IFC model. Hopefully that makes sense, yeah?
Yeah, it does. I have a hypothetical question. So let's say you're in a discussion with an owner and they are planning to build, a large multi-purpose building. What would be, let's say, 2-3 main things they should think about if they want to use either a digital twin or BIM after the construction, from the perspective of what might be the most valuable for them and how to think about it? How would you approach this conversation? Because it's quite often the clients ask that, yeah, we want something for the asset management phase, but what exactly and what's important for them? It's
it's a good question, and I've had the privilege of working with large clients who ask that question, and very often the expectation, which I think is a very reasonable one, is that when you come into the room, what you should be willing to do is to do your homework beforehand, right? And your homework is to go to their company report and find out about their strategic priorities, right? What is it that's at the top of the list that actually is going to resonate with the boardroom? Because it doesn't make sense going in there and saying, for instance, yes, we can make it so that every member of your staff is able to open up a digital twin on their screen and check on the humidity and temperature. They'll say, well, that's not even something that we're interested in. Mm-hmm. If they turn around and said that what they've found, as some people will say, is that the level of reactive maintenance has become so high that they are wondering whether they need to shut down some of their premises because the reactive maintenance and that type of thing, then I can present them with a value proposition which can reduce reactive maintenance. You say, well, what does that mean? especially on an existing building. What means that there is that by capturing the data on the different assets in the building and installing sensors, I can actually provide feedback on the condition of the different items in that building, air handling units, chillers, all of the building services. And I can then be able to say, I will build a system for you that will report on the condition of those systems and allow you to deliver maintenance where it's needed. You will, by that, reduce your reactive maintenance because your maintenance will be condition-based. Rather than paying all of this money for planned preventive maintenance, you will now be able to identify something that is going to cause that particular thing to fail and intervene when it's needed. Yeah, that's a value position. And I always think that business propositions are actually very straightforward. If you need to spend hours trying to explain to somebody your value proposition, then there's something wrong with your value proposition. And a lot of times when we sit there explaining to people why BIM is such an important thing and why people should be doing BIM or why should be doing digital twins, the value proposition is too complex, then I reckon that we're probably not hitting the right value proposition. I don't know if that, I'm hoping that comes close to answering your question in a high level, is aligning yourself with the existing strategy rather than trying to propose something that isn't, or should I say the existing things that organization values, and then being able to speak into that as opposed to trying to come up with something new, that they might not even value at all.
Yeah, just expanding a little bit more, I'm curious.
Sure.
So what you're saying, it feels like that it's something that would work for large building, large complexes, or clients with multiple large buildings. What's your opinion regarding if anything of this is actually useful for smaller buildings or for, let's say, the users of small buildings?
No, it's a very good point. And I've had to think about that because as I've thought around what would be valuable in terms of what I am doing as my own initiative, which is around Twin Genius, I've called it, and so on. I've said, well, is this only something that's good for big corporates? So my answer to you, Janis, is I describe it as occupancy-based environments. And when I say occupancy-based environments, I'm saying that if you have a sensor that's doing two things, that is detecting occupancy, so it's an office building, it's detecting occupancy. Let's suppose that you have the digital twin set up, that if that room is unoccupied for more than half an hour, the heating changes to be able to recognize that person, that there's nobody in that space, so why are we heating it up? It doesn't turn it cold, it just brings it down to maybe 19 degrees. But then as somebody enters the room, it raises it again. Now, all I'm saying is that something like a digital twin is a very powerful and easy way of being able to do that, not just for one building, but as the organization expands, you can apply it to several buildings through that type of system. And I'm saying that even for a small office, they will be able to reap energy benefits simply by having occupancy-based heating and cooling, right? And very often those are the organizations that can't afford the sophisticated controls of a very large building. So it's actually a very quick win for them in terms of reducing their energy bills.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Twin Genius. I suppose it would be a great time. Maybe you can show something. And meanwhile, I see your questions. I will ask them, David, but feel free to ask more. And I'll just give you, David, permission to share your screen. And maybe you can show what you're talking about.
I'll share, and I will just tab to the oh, it's this one here. So this is, as I said, it's an initiative that I have called Twin Genius. And what you're actually seeing is the digital twin of my own home. I've put in these types of sensors. I'm not sure if they're easily to see and so on. These are what we call LoRaWAN sensors. And this one is measuring temperature and humidity. And what this allows me to do, as you can see here, is to click on any room and it tells me the temperature in these different spaces and so on. The other thing it does is that it's tied in with analytics. So what you'll see coming up on the screen now is the Power BI dashboard, which is linked into all of that. It's fairly easy for people to work out what things are. It has this help screen just to tell you what's on different things. So it's measuring your historic gas consumption, your monthly gas consumption, daily gas consumption, relatively humidity, and others. So I'll just turn that off very quickly. But you can see there the different types of data that it's being able to produce. I think one of the things that I was keen on doing is saying to people, look, I realize that you probably want to know what the return on investment is. So what I've done is I've embedded a return on investment calculator,
Nice.
which is able to show what the cost of the system would be against the savings. And the idea then is that people can, it helps them to start thinking about it, not in terms of, you know, pretty pictures and, you know, spinning around models and that sort of thing, but actually what's the bottom line here? How much am I going to save over, I don't know, 7 years or 10 years and that type of thing. So, I mean, that's the essentials of what this does. My next stage of this is, I'll probably just scroll down here, which is what's in development now, is something I've described as Twin Box. So essentially, the Twin Box, that's just kind of explaining how that's installed. But Twin Box is essentially about giving people the components, the actual hardware that they need to be able to overlay this system on any building. So rather than trying to take legacy systems and try to connect those into the digital twin, this is giving you a set of sensors and the SIM card, which connects it straight into the system and allows you to start basically capturing that data. Yeah. So I think that's probably as much as I need to kind of share at this particular point, but you can see the kind of approach that I'm taking, and hopefully, if you know, that might generate some questions of its own and so on. I'll just I'll stop that for now, shall I? And just but it gives you some idea, and maybe there's questions your own that you have. You know,
I was looking at this and I was thinking, like, what difference would you say there is between like a building management system and this sort of digital twin system?
I think what I'm going to do is ask to, if I can share my screen again, and I think this will really bring out the difference for me. So I'm going to share my screen again. And in this case, what I'm going to do is going to sign into my thing. So this is just another way of looking at the data. This is actually, as most people are aware of that and so on. And in fact, the platform that I've created was built on that. So I'm just going to open up this window here and maximize that so everybody can see it. This is just logging into the twin. And I'm just going to do a very quick query because I was talking about the data structure, and this is quite important. So this is essentially probably the best way to see this, to look at this. So I've got my home, I've got the floors identified there. And as you can see, in each one of these, there's a room. On each floor, there are different rooms. And if I click on this one, for instance, you can see the temperature and the metadata that's associated with that. One of the things that probably worth noting there is that the values for that are being updated every 5 minutes. So if you look at temperature, you see it says the last update time, it's given today's date, and 29 minutes past. This is my time as opposed to yours, but you can see it's updating that for each one of these. Where it becomes useful, and I think this is really the powerful thing, is it's easy enough to do a very simple query. But if I said, I want to select the rooms from the digital twin on all floors where the temperature is above 19 degrees. Now, remember, this could be anything. It could be, I want to select across my entire portfolio air handling units where the vibration has reached a certain level.
Yeah.
I run my query, and it's identified these rooms. I could say, maybe above 23 degrees. That's the power. A BMS, it is very challenging to be able to interrogate in this way a twin model. BMS is one of the issues is that they're very often proprietary. So the language that you use to be able to interrogate them is not a query language like SQL, SQL. Yeah. This is SQL-like, and you start to see the power of this, because the power of this is, hold on a sec, if I can ask queries like this, why couldn't I take the same twin model, link this to AI, and start asking natural language queries? Why can't I ask questions like identify I gave you an example, the air handling units in hotels where the occupancy is below 55%. Do you see what I'm saying? And you see the power of that by comparison with having a sort of closed system BMS, which is specific to that building, but doesn't look across the whole estate. I can still go back to the entire, in this case, but that hierarchy you see there, I can build on it. It doesn't have to be one building. It could be an entire portfolio. Each one of these, just to kind of give you a clue as to what they do. So if I look at them, they have, the model is actually just a data structure. Yeah, it's an interconnected data structure that defines what it is and how it relates to the other data structures. And I'm saying that the good news for people who are on this call is you probably already have the good starting point for being able to do this, which is your IFC data. There are ways that you can move from where you are today to being able to do this and being able to deliver that kind of value to your clients. Yeah,
you already mentioned, but I saw a question, sorry, can't pronounce your name, but regarding the AI usage with these digital twins. So you mentioned a few possibilities. Maybe you have some other things you have tried out or seen that do you think there is coming like a huge change because of this? Because what you mentioned is just communication in natural language.
I think as with all things, I think it's going to be phased. So I think that, and a lot of that is because a lot of the buildings we have are not new build with new services, equipment, and so on. They are legacy buildings. And the challenge you have with that is, as I said before, that those types of systems are very proprietary, and they're not compatible with this technology that you're seeing here. So what do I see happening? I think that the phased approach to doing it is probably going to be initially that people are going to implement structured data through controlled vocabulary. All they might be doing is trying to capture and transfer the information, and I don't think we've done it well yet, but trying to transfer the information that's captured through BIM to populate it with real as-built information. If we're not able to do, there's the old saying, you need to walk, you need to walk before you run. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing. We need to be able to walk. If we are still struggling to provide accurate as-built data at handover, then it doesn't make sense us trying to go one step further. And I think people are realizing that. And one of the ways that we can begin to do that is by using interfaces. I created a tool set, very easy to use, called the Kobe Data Updated. There's been some interest in Latvia, actually, and other places in that platform. And all it is a way of taking the Kobe data and putting it into a mobile app, so that as you go room by room, you can put in the installation date, you can put in the manufacturer, all of the stuff that we know goes into Kobe. But I'm giving them an easier system of engagement. So my point to you is, until we get that right, I think it's premature to try to, or to assume that we're going to be able to implement digital twins in the wider industry. We really do need to get structured data, and we need to improve the systems of engagement where the people on site, not somebody sitting in front of a computer screen, but the people on site can very easily input installation data, and so that we can use it in operations.
Yeah, I can relate and agree, because what I've seen also is like this, having a huge leap from having nothing and then starting using everything. I haven't seen a very successful case for that. It's usually somehow step by step, maybe just starting with just design stage, something, trying out, then having the models, playing with them, and then thinking about integration and stuff like that later. But usually not a good result when you try to do everything on the first go.
But I agree with you. I mean, here's an example. I have seen situations where you sort of have a commissioning agent, so they're the ones who are running the functional tests, on the different systems, air handling units, chillers, this, that, and the boilers and that sort of thing. And when you say, okay, so are you ready? Have you got the reports? You see a PDF with handwriting on it. And I'm just like, I mean, and I'm not, what's my point here? My point here is that, and I think the baby steps here, digitization. I know people want to be talking about digitalization and digital transformation, but if people can't even get digitization right, so, and the thing that we have to learn as people who deal with very sophisticated tools, Janis, is to make it easy for people, especially for people for whom this is unfamiliar territory.
Yeah.
Give them a big app with big buttons to press to get, what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a very good point. You mentioned regarding several times regarding legacy buildings. So I'm wondering, so let's say not only legacy or heritage buildings, but let's say a building just has been just built and there hasn't been any structured way of collecting data, creating models or whatever. Do you think it would be still useful in that scenario to let's say model the building, the existing building, and then try to use it somehow for the maintenance or the management of the assets at this phase, or do you still think it's better from the beginning?
I think you just have to be very clear about what you're trying to do and when's the best time to do it. All right, let me see if I give you an example. This was a particular building, and all of the buildings that I've been working on for the past 10 years have been legacy buildings because they're parliamentary buildings. So I can resonate with that thing of not having a nice fresh site to work with and that sort of thing. The first thing is that the when is looking at opportunities to introduce the technology in a way that you can capture the data. So even if you have the basic structure of the building, to the extent that you can generate a very basic Kobe output that covers spaces and floors and, you know, the overall building itself. Even if that's all you have, you've got a starting point for structuring the information, don't you? And so I'm saying that you don't have to have the most complex model to do that. All that you need to do is be able to generate that basic structure that goes from, as you can see there, the building to the floors to the rooms. And then you can think about the assets that sit within those particular spaces, and you can begin to capture data that's associated with that. The second opportunity is that at some point there's going to be some refurbishment work done, and there's going to be an opportunity there for some investment in, for instance, laser scanning, and then being able to selectively model the aspects of that building that are important to what you're trying to do. So again, I'm not saying that you have to sit there meticulously modeling every switch, every light fixture. It's just to then say, and that comes down to level of detail, level of information. And I think if you work that way and you do what's absolutely necessary rather than trying to do everything, then there is a place for that. So, you know, the platforms that I'm accustomed to working with, and I'm, you know, this is not to say that's the only platform that does this, is Planon. And Planon has a mobile app, and the mobile app allows you to see the 3D model. You can, if you're in a particular space, you can locate a particular asset in that space and start, your maintenance team can actually start to input data that's connected to that representation. So you upload the model, and there's a unique identifier that links to the data in the computer-aided facility management system, and that's how it works. So, and you can get value out of that, because the value is that instead of your maintenance person doing inspection, going back to, you know, their office, looking up the drawings, looking up the service manuals, and all of that stuff, all of that Kobe stuff, if you've collected it properly, is going to be in their mobile app. Yeah. But it takes effort to do that, because my experience has been not everybody's on the same page. There are some people who would just say, look, yeah, we've got a nice 3D model, I can spin it around, and it was very useful during the design, but that's the end of it, right? And so the last piece of this, and because I know there are other questions, is that the challenge we have is around level of ambition. There are going to be organizations where there is no ambition to do that, because they don't see themselves as early adopters. They don't even see themselves as the early majority. They are, and have probably characteristically been, wait and see. You know, these are the people who maybe iPhones had been out for 10 years, you know, before they decided, you know what, I think it looks like, yeah, I think I'll get one. Finally, I'll get one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you can't, you know, that it has to do with level of ambition. And I think people sometimes, we as people of BIM, we're very often early adopters. We have to be able to read the room. When we're talking to our customers, I know that this is something that you have to do all the time, and say, you know, what's the level of ambition in here? Are these people really going to be early adopters, or are they going to simply kind of follow the leader? Yeah. Which is a very different culture, and we just have to be, you know, be aware of that. Yeah.
I have to ask, you come from UK, and,
sure.
and I would say the standards also have the ones that are used globally come from your country. What do you think? Are they so BIM is mandatory in UK, I think already 10 years. It's anniversary, I think, right? This year, 10 years, 2016. Yeah. Do you think you have over exaggerated the requirements, the standards, and all that, or is it kind of, has it kind of benefited?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a very fair question, and I think it deserves a fair answer. You know, one of the things that's been, I think that most countries are aware of this, is the Grenfell tragedy. And with the Grenfell tragedy, one of the things we had is a big inquiry. And you've got to remember that not everybody was on board with, you know, this idea of a common data environment where all of the interactions between the different parties involved with the project are being captured, okay? So what did it mean? It meant that when the inquiry needed to find out who did what and when, they had to go into something like, you know, over, you know, hundreds and hundreds of email accounts.
Yeah.
And start working through that. So when somebody says to me, well, you know, what is the benefit of all of these initiatives? You know, you're talking about a common data environment and so on. For me, the idea that if something like that, God forbid, but if something like that was to happen again, my hope is that with a common data environment, we could get to the bottom of who did what, because all of that information would be centrally controlled and registered. And so the question would be, well, you know, is everybody applying it 100%? It's interesting because although I think some of the challenge was in the mandate itself, I think saying that all centrally procured projects will be done in BIM has the same challenge you have with digital twin. People will interpret it in different ways. And people will say, oh, well, we produced a 3D model at some point in the project. So there we go. We've delivered, you know, BIM level 2 or something like that. And of course, the other challenge with that is the cost of policing it. Are you literally going to have people going into different projects and, you know, checking whether this person is doing BIM level 2 or not? That's what it was called at the time. Yeah. I think that there's all of that type of stuff. At the same time, I think that there is proof that it does deliver benefits. There is proof that even if you're just looking at the design phase, that having earlier coordination is reducing the amount of errors and rework on site. Here's where I think where the problem is. I think this is one that I think we all have to listen to. The challenge we have is that instead of trying to do the same with better tools, we try to do more than the same with better tools. So here's my example. My example is that you're a roofer and you have been using hammer and nail for years. And then you get the benefit of a, you know, nail gun, right? But instead of being able to do the same work, every time that you go to a different client, customer, and he shows you the roof drawing, you say, no. I can do a roof that's way more complex than the roof you've just showed me. So the guy says, well, you sure you can still do it in the time that I need? I've got a nail gun, right?
Yeah.
So you start doing this thing. But you suddenly realize that, whoa, if I just stuck to the same roof the guy had showed me, I probably could actually get more work done. I am now doing a more complex roof, right? And we do that. We go into a project. All that's needed, let's say, is to generate, you know, some 2D drawings out of the 3D model and so on, with some schedules coming out as well. What do we go in there? You know, I could do 4D as well. Yeah. Who asked you for 4D? And I say, I've just been doing 5D. Yeah. And we just keep going. Then when we get to the end of the project and the guy says, so you finished yet? No, I'm still working on the 7D.
I mean, look, man, I see this all the time.
we, you know what I'm saying? We make there's a phrase we use in the UK. I don't know if there's other. I think this one is very. You're making a rod for your own back. You know, you're
Yeah.
making a rod for your own. In other words, you're creating problems for yourself. Don't overcomplicate. If the real requirement that gets the job done is, just very basic, generate the drawings, generate the schedules. Don't go in there saying, oh, look, I can do 3D, I can do 4D, I can do,
So true. Yeah.
yeah. Oh dear. But
Yeah,
this is what happens. This is what happens.
it was supposed to be like make the processes more efficient, faster. I see the opposite all the time. I mean, the designers are still finishing their design in mid-construction because of the BIM requirements.
Well, that's the other thing. That's the other thing. The other thing is prioritizing. So here's what happens. I've sat in one of this. So I promise you, I have sat in a coordination meeting where somebody has generated a clash report, and they've literally sat going through. So, John, so clash 2,269. What are you going to do about that? And he says, oh, okay, well, I looked at that, and I think what we're going to have to do is to kind of move the piping and just allow the duct to go straight through. Okay. So, Mary, what about clash 2,230? Literally going through. There's no grouping. There's no prioritization that says, look, let's fix the big stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Let's fix the big stuff. And I wonder if it's because we're not starting from. At one point, BIM was a tool that essentially was used by people who were doing coordination anyway, but this was like a power tool for people to do coordination. What started to happen is that it became something that people could drive the software, and people then managed to get job titles with BIM this, BIM that, BIM the next, and so on. And I'd be honest, my last job title was actually project BIM lead, so I can't really say that but that I didn't ask for that title. But you can see what's happening is that if you don't actually understand what good looks like for coordination, and then say to yourself, oh, I know what's happening here. We need to firstly prioritize structure. Secondly, any gravity pipe work, because those, the falls in those pipes, we can't kind of change that. We have to work with that and start having a hierarchy. And I'm not saying that's a very simple way to look at it, but I think that's what's needed. We need people who actually understand how buildings work, and they don't just look at a software tool and think, oh, I can make a living out of being the only person that really understands how this piece of software works, or one of very few people who understands how to drive, I don't know, synchro, or how to drive, we've got to have something more. And I came from working on construction site and working in design offices. I'm not trying to if you can make a living out of doing this, fine. Just, consider it continuing professional development.
Yeah.
Go on a course and just say, look, I don't know anything about MEP coordination. I don't even know what these things do. I get these models. I want to do this, 3 hours a week or 2 hours a week. I want to understand how it works. But you can't just think that you're going to be driving the software and achieving efficiency. It just doesn't work that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we are close to the end. I heard from our previous conversation before the event that you mentioned something about a book. I know you have written one already. It's in my bookshelf as well for, I don't know, almost 10 years. So it was a good one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're working on now?
Yeah, it's something I'm passionate about. And I guess, the Grenfell tragedy, it was back in 2017. and it had a massive impact on people. As a result, 5 years later, the Building Safety Act came into force. And what I've seen since then are varying attempts at defining what's known as the golden thread of information. And what we're saying when we use the phrase golden thread, we're talking about it's an emblem, it's a metaphor for traceability. So what I've kind of undertaken is a book that explains how we can use the capabilities around information management, BIM, all of these different things to be able to implement that traceability. And I'm very fortunate in having a co-author known as May Winfield. I don't know if you're aware. She's a legal expert, a great lawyer who actually understands, how the Building Safety Act is going to be implemented in a way that ensures good governance. So that's what I'm working on. And I guess that for me, the thing that I'm very keen on is outcomes. It's one thing to be able to write a book, and it's really nice when somebody says, I actually bought the book and it's on my bookshelf and so on. But I would love to be able to say 10 years from now that the outcome was that we never have a Grenfell tragedy again. The outcome was that it raised enough awareness about building safety and what needs to be done, that people, and gave a blueprint for how to achieve that we actually know that something like Grenfell is very, very unlikely to happen again. And that for me would be, I'm not that far from retirement, so that would be definitely the high point to my career. Yeah.
Do you have any idea when it's coming out?
I'm looking at early next year. One of the things that we do know is that there is going to be a lot of, should I say, the law enforcement in this country will be potentially bringing charges for people who have broken the law towards the end of this year. That's the prospect and that sort of thing. And I feel that if it is going to have an impact, it's probably better to wait for people to see that and for people to realize that, there are serious consequences for getting this wrong. I think in that climate, I think being able to bring that out early next year is going to be the right time for it, for people to say, look, yes, there are big consequences for, getting building safety wrong. But, here's a book that actually is pointing us in the right direction and saying, look, this is the way forward. So you should be looking at it spring of next year. Okay.
Yeah, interesting. Do you have any final words for the people that maybe are just thinking about having digital twins on their projects, or anything else you maybe want to say or didn't say?
Yeah, I think, the one thing, my journey, and I can only speak to my journey and hopefully see if that benefits people. My journey has been that I believe there's value in persistence, but I also believe that there's value in being able to see the opportunities of technology. I know for a fact that some of the coding that I have had to use in Power BI and other things, I couldn't have written without the benefit of AI. So my encouragement to anybody here, even if it seems like a very basic question that you think, why am I throwing this at AI? I think that there's a value in being able to say, look, I don't know how to do this. I'm not sure how long it's going to take for me to find somebody who does. Let me even try and see if AI has an answer. So I think that's probably the first thing is to leverage AI as much as possible if it's going to help you to kind of get further. I think the other piece of it is, don't be afraid to make mistakes and to own up to those mistakes. I told you a bit earlier, and I will leave you with that thought, that I saw things that I did in Power BI, which with hindsight, I should have been doing at the source of the data rather than in the dashboard of the data. And I put my hands up to that. And I think the third and last thing is really encourage everybody to learn from each other. And I think that, things like this, Janis, has certainly helped people to start collaborating, communicating. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share in this forum. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thank you very much, David. It's really been, like, as you say, educational conversation, I think, for many. And you can only see, I suppose you only scratch the surface of your knowledge and your experience as well. So thank you very much for your time. I'm really looking forward to your book. So I suppose next year. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all who have been on this call.
Yeah,
Take care.
thank you. Bye, David.
Bye. Bye.